Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Maliga Young Park dotting inside my chest, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate everybody for stopping by very much. So I have the round 5, game 5 between Magnus Carlsen and Andrey Esipenko. If anybody is coming from the Philippines, as always, to my people, I will say mabuhay, kamusta na, masaya kong makita kang muli. Ingat lagi to you guys. I'm tayo. Should be morning time. Yes, it's just morning. Yes. All right, cool. Appreciate you guys very much for coming. Anybody that is coming from Norway, I will say God Morgan to you, and Tusen Tak for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. Anybody that is coming from Russia, I would say Dobre Utra, and Spasibo for coming by and taking a look at my stuff real quick. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna be working on it. I just learned how to say good morning, so I'm gonna be working on it. So Dobre Utra, I think I got it good. So yeah, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we have D4, knight comes to F6, C4, E6, knight to F3, D5, C3. So we do have the Catalan opening. Anybody who watches my channel, I mean, we see this like time and again. It is tested, it is true. It is very solid to play, especially from the white side. You definitely get a nice little advantage as white. It's not like it's, game winning or anything, but, you definitely have a really strong position as white coming out of the Catalan. So bishop comes to B4, bishop to D2 blocking the check. Bishop back to E7. So this is actually the Catalan opening, and it is called the retreat variation. It might kind of seem like it does waste the tempo for black because you just kind of, did this and stuff. But just a little bit. But I mean, it's still really good for both sides. It's definitely not damaging black's position at all. It's kind of getting a little bit of a tempo because usually the bishop does want to kind of go here. So very often the bishop does move again. So it's fairly even. So bishop comes to G2, castles by black, we see castles by white, knight B to D7, queen comes to B3, and knight to B6. So this is asking like a nice little question to this pawn here. What are you going to do? Because the knight did not come to this square. A lot of times when you have the bishop taken here, the knight comes here. And it's pretty natural because you do have a piece that's already ready to capture this pawn if you have a D takes C4. But we do have C5 in the position. Knight comes to C4. You have a couple of different options in this position. What we actually see in the game is bishop to C3. And this is the novelty of the game. It's not the most favored move because you're kind of putting this bishop on a diagonal that doesn't really exist because it is getting blocked by this pawn. So ideally, it's not the best square. You had the ability to go bishop to F4, just getting the bishop outside the pawn chain so that you can, hit an E3. And you also had queen to C2. And queen to C2 is going to become relevant because you'll see in a second how queen to C2 would have helped the position just a little bit. But like I said, we did see bishop to C3. B6, and this is the position I'm talking about. If we were to place queen to C2 in this position instead of bishop to C3, after you saw B6, you can actually play B4 and kind of support the capture here. And then you get a nice little open file situation going on. So it might would have been just a little bit beneficial. And plus, I mean, the Catalan, the most natural move for the queen is to C2. You just keep an eye on this. You keep an eye on this E4 square. If you had something like bishop here, knight B to D2, you would definitely be putting a lot of pressure on this and trying to push E4. In the Catalan, E4 is almost always something that you want to see as white. But like I said, we had bishop to C3, B6, and then now we push the pawn to C6. So a little bit of care has to, be employed here because, you do have a very far-reaching pawn that now you're going to have to protect. It's like I said, I mean, it doesn't have any pawns on either side that are protecting it. So it's pretty deep all by itself in the black's position. A5 comes, knight B to D2. Bishop comes to A6. It was basically either that or trade on D2. Which is beneficial for white because you're going to take back with this pawn and you have a lot of pressure, enabling a pawn push on E4. Knight takes C4, bishop takes C4. Now you have to get the queen out of dodge. Queen comes back to C2. A4. B3 was just too convenient to try to knock this bishop away. So A4 stops that. We have knight to e5. So now we're kind of getting a nice little defense of this pawn here. Plus, knight to e5 is something that you want to play in a Catalan anyway. We have rook f to e1. At any point, if you want to move this queen, you do have to be protecting this pawn. And like I said before, you know, bishop, the queen is eyeing e4, the bishop is eyeing e4, and so is this rook now. So you definitely have the ability to push e4 at some point. Bishop comes to d6, bishop down to d2. We see a3, b3, knight comes to e4, and now we have bishop takes e4. And then pawn takes e4. And this is actually kind of a critical position that you're in. You know, there are a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of options in this position. So if you guys want to go ahead and pause the video and see how Magnus Carlsen handles this position, go ahead and do so. All right, cool. So it might kind of seem like, hey, man, you know what? My knight is defended by this pawn. You know, like we're good to go. Like queen taking here is going to help me protect this pawn. But that actually would not be the most accurate way to play the position because you actually would be getting black would be getting the pawn back. So the most accurate move in the position and the one that Magnus Carlsen played, so it's best by far, is actually knight to d7. And knight to d7 is very inconvenient for black because now you have an issue with this knight that's super protected on the square. It's like a beautiful outpost. And I mean, what are you doing with your rook? The computer suggests that the best possible move is going to be rook to e8, allowing queen takes e4, because the only other alternative is for you to lose the exchange, which is what we actually saw in the game. We actually saw f5 giving away the exchange in the game. So knight took f8 and then queen took f8. But if we actually go back, after pawn takes e4, if you did just say, hey, I think everything's covered, let me go ahead and take with queen takes e4, you would actually be in a situation where the problem of this bishop being undefended comes into play. Now we have bishop takes e5, and you absolutely do not have the ability, you do not have the ability to take back with a pawn to maintain the protection of this pawn because you're just going to be dropping your bishop completely. So what you're having to do in this position is actually take with the queen and allow the recapture of this pawn. So now everything is equal. You have opposite colored bishops. So this is more of like a possible drawn type of an endgame. So this actually would be very even. So like I said, we did have queen takes f8, and then basically Magnus Carlsen just goes full steam ahead and turns into trade mode because you are up an entire exchange and the pawns are completely equal. So you definitely do want to start trading pieces down. So bishop comes to f4. Even though you're not going to have the nicest pawn structure after the bishop takes, you do have this really deep advanced pawn, and you know, you just have both rooks. So the rook comes to d8. You see bishop to e5. You definitely want to try to get a file open. Right now, there are no open files. So you're not in the best possible scenario with having two rooks. So to have two rooks and to get yourself in the most advantageous position, it's to open some files up. So the bishop takes on e5, pawn takes on e5. We see h6, and then immediately rook a to d1. Because like I said, you are definitely trying to get rid of this rook because that is black's one strong point. If the rook does move away, you know, you have the ability immediately to, you know, hit a rook to d7 and then swing the other rook over, and now you've just taken complete control over this d file. So I mean, it's all pretty beneficial for white. So rook does take d1, rook takes d1. We see queen to b4. King comes to f1. We want to make sure that if we move either one of these pieces, you know, we have this pawn covered. We definitely don't want any issues back here. So e3, pushing f3, h5 comes, rook up to d7, and this is a very dangerous rook. On top of the fact that it's already beneficial to get on the 7th rank with a rook, you know, you are threatening just to clearly just take this pawn off the board, which is what we actually see in the game. h4, rook takes c7, h3, rook back over to d7, and you are in a position where Esipenko does resign the game. And basically it's because there really isn't a good way to prevent this pawn from promoting. And since the king did move over here to f1, You don't have any penetration with the king on e1. And so, you know, maybe let's say something like the rook, the king comes over. You know, you can definitely push with check here. The king would probably come down here, and then you're going to be pushing to c7. And as you can see, the bishop is going to probably have to throw itself in the way like this. You know, but you can always just take here. The king will come over, and then you'll be having check coming up here, and this is actually mating. So that's just one possible scenario, but I mean, there are many scenarios, but it's just not something that you're going to be winning as black. So like I said, that's why he did go ahead and resign the game. So that was a pretty interesting game. It kind of looked like early on, you know, after c6 was pushed, that Magnus was going to kind of have some problems with this pawn being so far advanced, because usually when you have a pawn that's so far advanced, you usually like to have some of your pieces either behind it or for it to be at least getting protected by, you know, like another piece. And it was really nice to see him actually like figure out a way to do that, because it just is not obvious just from looking at the position. So like I said to my people in the Philippines, Maraming salamat, aking makaibigan, po sa nanonood. And you know, for anybody who is coming from Norway, tusen tak to you. Anybody who is coming from Russia, spasibo to you. And Makita Tayo Mamaya to my people in the Philippines. And I will see y'all next time. All right.